I'm Jacqueline Isaacs, also known as the Unsmug Mum and jacquelineisaacs.co.uk, and this is our final video in the sugar series where I have been trying to lead up to some of the secrets behind my weight loss and how I managed to shift that excess weight that I'd been holding on to and building up, and how I'm managing and maintaining it after, and hopefully obviously maybe that might help you guys. Bear with me, this is an unrehearsed video, as most of them are. As some of you know, I am in the midst of launching a brand new business over on jacquelineisaacs.co.uk and preparing for my very first stall at my first Christmas market. But I really felt it was very important, especially in the lead up to Christmas 2018, to finish off this sugar series in terms of the food. This will not be the end of the videos. There's a lot more to it than just the food you eat. I will be doing a series of videos, for instance, that deal with feelings, what feelings are, and how we can manage those and understand those better, because it's all part and parcel. We're not robots, and it's not just about our fuel. So let's go. So just a quick recap. One of the videos I talked about Asbo additives, bear with the high-tech props, and we talked about how sometimes when we've plateaued in our weight loss, or we're puzzled as to, you know, we think we eat fairly healthy, why is it we can't shift that weight? That could be a reason, because we learned that many of our additives are fat soluble, in that means that they can enter into fat cells, and I called them Asbo additives because I wanted to align them with extreme antisocial behaviour. And obviously extreme antisocial behaviour in our society, what do we do with them? We go and stick them in a cell. We remove them from being a threat to our society, and we go and stick them and remove them in a cell. And our body does the same thing with our things that it doesn't understand, can't use. It sees it as a potential threat. So obviously if our diet is high in these additives that are artificial, doesn't know what to do with them for safety reasons and to protect the whole, it has a tendency to stick them in a white padded cell, i.e. a fat cell. So some of that fat might not actually be what we're eating in terms of our calories. It could be what's been added into our food. So that's important to remember when we now go on to dealing and understanding what happens with sugar when we digest it. We have talked about the different sugars, and we have talked about glucose being our body's preferred source of energy. Every cell and organ in our body can use it. It's so important that our body manages and sustains a level of glucose in our blood at all times, in case it is needed anywhere. That is important. That is G for glucose, G for gimme, gimme, gimme. We know glucose comes largely from starchy carbohydrates, and that's why I do not advocate extreme low carb diets, because our body really does need glucose. It's not something that we should be trying to cut out and starve it and deprive it of. And certainly if you try and go on an extreme low carb diet, our brain and probably body is going to kick up a huge fuss and give you like all sorts of nasty side effect symptoms to scream at you to go and eat some glucose. And this is why starch is basically, we talked about glucose being a monosaccharide, which is one sugar molecule. Starches are polysaccharides, which are many saccharide sugar, many sugars. So it's basically many glucose sugars. And just a quick recap, we talked about how obviously these bonds between the glucose molecules in starches, don't think that because the glucose is in a carbohydrate that that's going to take a long time to digest. It only takes a spot of hydrolysis, water in our spit, to start to break the bonds. All you need is a drop of water, and those bonds will be dissolved, and boom, you've got glucose, which is why it's quite important to slow down things that are high in carb. So it's not to not eat them, it's thinking about how to slow them down. And one of the reasons is we talked about our liver, and we talked about, you know, if we eat an influx of, say, starches and sugars that hit our body really, really fast, can get absorbed like sand through a sieve really, really quickly, they're going to hit the glucose, the carb checkout in our liver really, really, really fast. Things might start falling off, and fat storage is going to start happening. So what the key is slowing it down. And one of my mottos, obviously, we talked about, if it doesn't make you chew, it ain't going to reach your poo. And that's important. Obviously, we've got good guys in our guts, good bacteria. We have bacteria everywhere. I mean, something to bear in mind, a general rule of thumb, is we kind of know that sugar and starchy carbohydrates can be bad for our teeth. And the reason is because the sugars feed the bad guys. They feed the bad bacteria in our mouth, which can damage our teeth. You know, things like crisps can be as bad as sugar because obviously crisps, starchy carbohydrate, lots of glucose molecules, dissolves very quickly in the mouth, becomes sugar very quickly in the mouth, feeds the bad guys, feeds the bad bacteria. And that it holds true for the bacteria in our gut. Now, bearing in mind that pretty much most of our immune system is our gut, it's all about good guys and bad guys battling it out. We really want to boost and feed the good guys to help us and try and limit the bad guys. What do the good guys eat? The good guys eat fibre and resistant starch, and the bad guys eat sugar. So just in the same way to visualise eating a carrot, for instance, you don't think of a carrot high in fibre is going to rot your teeth, whereas something, maybe crisps and sweets, is going to dissolve and turn into sugars very quickly in our mouth. It's going to feed the bad guys, bad bacteria, could rot our teeth, and the exact same is true for our gut. So that's one way to remember it. So we talked about glucose and starch, and we mentioned fructose, and we mentioned that fructose comes from fruit. And I have gone at length, hopefully, to keep mentioning all the way through these videos that I am not anti-fruit. Yes, fruit has fructose sugar in it, but it is also packaged, if when eaten in Mother Nature's packaging, as you know, big fan of Mother Nature here and how it appears in nature. If you eat it with Mother Nature's packaging, that is your natural hairy, porridgey plug holes and sticks down a stream, because the all-important soluble and insoluble fibres not only feed the good guys in our gut, they go all the way through our system and trigger the release of peptide YY at the end of our 22-foot long intestines, because we do not digest the fibres. They create hairy porridgey plug holes, as you think of the gloopy porridgey effect and hairy plug holes effect, that soluble and insoluble fibre, which is going to slow down the absorption of that energy, our holes in our gut sieve, and sticks down the stream. Some of it is going to go all the way through and take some of that energy out with them. So obviously, in terms of whole fruits that haven't had that all-important fibre removed, in terms of the whole fruit, that has got natural packaging around it to help us to limit the amount of that sugar that gets absorbed and so on. So that's why I'm not anti-fruit. So then we went on, we have talked about sucrose. Now this is the biggie. This is the one that, should we be scared of it or not? Should we not eat it? Should we be cutting it out? Should we be no sugar? Well, here's a revelation. I am in terms of weight, I'm the lightest I've been for years. Not only did I lose the bit of excess weight I wanted, I continued to keep losing that little bit more very slowly and gradually, just carrying on what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm deprived. I don't feel like I'm on a diet. I've changed the way I'm eating, and I'm thinking being a bit more clever. Over the last few years, I eat chocolate, I eat mince pies, I eat crisps. You know, it's not necessarily about restricting our food intake. It's about being clever with our food combinations and understanding, and the clues are there. The clues are there, clues are in nature. Okay, so we talked about, if we go back to sucrose then, understanding about this tabletop sugar. Why is it so bad for us? What is the fuss? Right, let's really understand the science behind it, because that ultimately is going to help us understand exactly what happens and what we need to do. So we talked glucose, G for glucose, G for great, G for gimme, 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 the body wants it, right? F for fructose. Sucrose, unlike glucose and fructose on their own, which are monosaccharides, one sugar molecules, sucrose is what's called a disaccharide. I mentioned it before, two, and as we can see here, 1, 2 saccharide sugars, disaccharide. Sucrose has 2 sugar molecules that are holding hands there, closely bonded together. They're holding hands very tightly there, as you can see. Why is this bond so important? And why is it important in understanding biochemically what happens when we eat sugar? We need to remember our liver. Now, as we have talked about this lovely diagram that we talked about when we ate fats and carbohydrates as they appear in nature. This is my gut drawing, goes in the mouth, there we go, there's our stomach, there's our intestines, there's our poo factory at the end. This is our liver and this is our heart. And I have already talked about in previous videos how when we eat carbohydrates, they get absorbed through the gut lining of the stomach. The glucose goes that way straight into our liver to be dealt with. Fats, on the other hand, they go in. Fat's great, releases a hormone called leptin, which is something that helps us feel satisfied, so that's good. Fats is not, again, something that we should be looking at restricting or cutting out necessarily. We just need to be aware of our fats and which fats we're eating. Because, and I think that helps us, is that instead of whizzing through to the liver like glucose sugars do, carbohydrate sugars do, it goes a different route into our body. It goes up the yellow brick road, remember? This is our lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system takes it in, as you can see, 2 different routes there, yeah? So carbs go this way, fats go up the yellow brick road and get into our body that way and get into our bloodstream, into our bloods, which is important, I think, a concept to understand that when we eat fat, that it's going to go into our blood, because then that can maybe help influence quite naturally our fat choices, deciding which fats that we really want going straight into our blood, because we seem to have this illusion or myth of yes, our body is a powerful detoxifying machine, you know, our liver does a great job, but when we think about the concept of fat going into our body and going into our bloodstream, not via the liver in the same way the carbohydrates do, and probably one of the first organs it reaches, because the all-important organ that pumps all the blood around the body is the heart, maybe we can start to grasp why it is quite important as to which fats we choose to consume. Not to cut them out, but which ones we eat and how much of them. So remembering that, I drew our liver like this as 2 checkouts, remember, with a little dude in the middle operating 2 checkouts. One checkout is for carbs and one checkout is for fat. And I said how it was fascinating how both nature and our bodies have sort of naturally separated carbohydrate energy and fat energy. And we've got to remember, I mean, a lot of these conflicting advice about modern day advice about we should go back to eat like the paleo cavemen style and be a paleo sort of diet, hunter-gatherer style diets, or maybe our diet should be not just largely but high plant-based diet, and maybe we need to be vegan and so forth. Now you can be vegan and still eat a shed load of additives. So, you know, you've got a healthy vegan, but you can have an unhealthy vegan. And the same goes for paleo. You know, just because something is meat and plant doesn't mean that it's not got any nasties in it. And really the true meaning of paleo is high plant and going for things that do not have the hormones and artificial gunk added in. And that is key, because as you know, I've compared the two, and basically they have so much in common, and the commonality is that to be a healthy vegan and a proper paleo, you need to be eating things as it appears in nature. And that's your clue. Mother Nature, as I say, all packages all of her energies, whether it be fat energy in, say, like seeds, nuts, avocados, for instance, or her carbohydrate energy, such as like fruit, for instance, and I don't know, like potatoes, grains. They are all packaged with fibre, which is our porridgey, hairy porridgey plug holes, our clogging up the holes in our gut sieve, and our sticks down a stream, sweeping it out and lasting the 22-foot long intestines, feeding our good guys. We got to remember these hunter-gatherer style diets that go back in time. The crucial bit of information there is eating as it appears in nature. And what we've got to just remember is that over these however years, many years, stupid amount of years that our bodies have evolved and our planet has perhaps changed, the two have evolved in sync with each other. And so it's not surprising to me that our body does a similar thing in that it, you know, we have the carb energy going this way to the liver, and we have the fat energy going this way up the yellow brick road, the lymphatic system, into the bloodstream. And it's like this natural separation. It appears in nature, it appears in our natural foods, it appears in our body, because the two evolved together. So we only really create our problems when we mess with that design, really, and we start concentrating our carbs into our flours, and we start concentrating our juices, removing the fibre and concentrating the energy, and concentrating fat energy in our processed meats, concentrating our carb energy in crisps and donuts and so forth, and not having that all important fibre to help slow it down, which is ever present in nature. And obviously going back to the liver, we can start to appreciate why that natural separation might be there. Imagine one little dude with two checkouts, and the carb energy is going here, and especially if we've eaten lots of bread and crisps and I don't know, lots of concentrated flour based products, that's going to rush in onto that, and he's going to have a hell of a job trying to keep up with that. But then equally, you know, if the fat comes in, does that arrive at the same time? Well, no, because obviously if we've eaten fat, that goes up the yellow brick road. So there is a little bit of time and a little bit of separation there. It's all deliberate design. It's all evolved in line with our food, our bodies and the planet have evolved together. Okay, so now going back to why is then sucrose sugar, tabletop sugar, sweeties, the stuff that is added into anything and everything, because when let's say in the 20th century we got obsessed with making things low fat. What we did, fat is flavour, when they took the fat away they needed to boost the flavour somehow, so they chucked in a load of sugar. And that's still true of products today, so you know, watch those ingredients lists, because very often where there's not fat there is sugar, or if there's not sugar there is sweetener, artificial. I think it is starting to hit the media about artificial sweeteners not necessarily being the completely benign, passes through our body all innocently and our body doesn't react to it at all, which obviously anything we put into our system is going to have an effect at the end of the day. So sucrose sugar, why is it when we start to consider our liver and this little dude here, why is this bond then so important? Well, as you saw in this slightly modified version of the liver, I deliberately designed the carb energy, the blue G for glucose, on this side, on this checkout, and the red F that I previously put down as F for fats is also the red F I used for F for fructose. And the reason for that is biochemically, comparing to glucose, which every cell and organ our body uses, fructose energy, the only organ that can deal and metabolize fructose, sugar, is our liver, this guy. So unlike natural fats, when we eat actual fat, which goes up the yellow brick road into our bloodstream, this is an actual fat. It's not an actual fat. Who's it holding hands with? It's holding hands with this guy, glucose. Glucose for great. Glucose for gimme, gimme, gimme. The body wants it. Glucose gets absorbed very easily and quickly because the body wants it. It needs it. Who's it holding hands with? Fructose. Go back to our liver. Fructose, the only organ in the body that can metabolise fructose and deal with it, basically, is the liver. This guy. It doesn't go up the yellow brick road, therefore there is not that natural separation. So we've got this checkout being busy with the glucose, and fructose is metabolised on the fat checkout, F for fructose, F for fat. Can we see now how this disaccharide bond between these two holding hands very tightly suddenly becomes very relevant and very important when it comes to managing and understanding our weight? Because what happens, let's see if I can, with this glucose-fructose bond, holding hands so tightly, there's no of the natural fat wandering off to the yellow brick road while this way goes to the liver. They are holding hands. They arrive at the exact same time. Now, if we remember what I have said about carbs whizzing through the holes in our guts very, very fast, like sand in a sieve, water through a sieve, especially if we're not eating it with any fibre to slow it down and impede it, it rushes through very quick, right? Think of sugar dissolving in like hot water. It dissolves, it disappears into that solution very, very quickly. And it dissolves and melts in our mouth. Think of sweeties and things melt in our mouth. Bread, if we held it long enough, melt in our mouth. Our body absorbs carb energy very, very quickly. And we have talked about how man-made carbohydrates such as breads and pastas and things, which, you know, bearing in mind that these are starch-based products that are already many sugars, and then what we do is we remove the bulky fibre and we concentrate that energy. It suddenly becomes many, 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 many sugars. So what we need to do is slow that down for this dude so it doesn't hit him and he's not overworked and things don't start falling off the checkout. In the case of sucrose tabletop sugar, the added sugar that comes under all sorts of weird and wonderful names, glucose, fructose syrup as a whole, there's a massive list out there for how many names added sugar can be hidden under. And watch out for those ingredients lists, because ingredients lists are ordered by order of size. So the biggest ingredient has to come first on that ingredient list. So if the first ingredient says sugar, sugar is the bulk of that food. It's the biggest ingredient. But these companies that make our foods and make a lot of money out of making our foods and feeding us and us buying their products are not silly, and they have an awful lot of money and investment put into marketing. And what they do is they separate out lots of different sugars under different names. Ultimately, they all come together and are sugar. But what happens when they start separating out different types of sugar and giving it lots of different weird looking names is it hides the amount of sugar that is actually in that food. Because obviously, remembering that ingredients lists are ordered in terms of size, biggest ingredient coming first. If the biggest ingredient in a food is sugar, but the manufacturer doesn't really want you to know that and be frightened, put off from buying their product because of that, what they'll do is they'll use maybe lots of different types of sugar, lots of different names, maybe different syrupy names or things that we've never even heard of before and don't really understand what they are. And what that does, because each of those different types of sugar are smaller, it separates and scatters it out through the ingredients. So we can actually be quite deceived as to how much sugar is actually in a product. So bear that in mind. Now, obviously, going back to this glucose-fructose bond, F for fructose, F for fat, carb energy on this checkout, fat energy being dealt on this checkout in the liver. Now, unlike fat, which goes up the lymphatic system, the yellow brick road, this guy is holding hands with glucose. So it arrives in the liver at the exact same time. Now think of how the bulk has been removed, anything to slow it down or impede its absorption has been removed. Think of how fast carbs and sugars are dissolved and absorbed into our bodies. They arrive, all that influx of both at exactly the same time. I mean, this guy would be inundated enough if a lot of glucose arrived all at once, if we envisage that as a checkout in there. What's going to happen if there's two going at once? Yeah, so already we can see how important it is to slow it down. Not to not eat it necessarily, but to slow it down and impede its absorption. That's the key. What happens then? So liver's going crazy, lots and lots of this stuff has arrived at the same time, which means these checkouts are going crazy both at the same time. We have the carb metabolizing side of the liver going rah, working hard. We have the fat metabolizing side of the liver going working hard at exactly the same time. And this is, I don't know if you've ever heard of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because as you can imagine, two of those checkouts, both of the metabolic pathways in your liver are being overrun both at the same time, overrun, overworked. It's kind of quite easy to see how things start falling off the checkout and you get the fat build up in the dangerous areas, because that fat is not going to go very far. It's going to stick around the organs. It's falling off the checkouts, yeah, so it's going to stay in that area, which is why the term skinny fat can hold true, because obviously you can be an unhealthy slim person. So obviously this is where fibre becomes all important, slowing it down, so that helps. But slowed down, it still arrives at the exact same time. What is different from this F for fat, F for fructose? What is different about fructose to fat? Fat is energy. Fat is energy that we can use. We know this, yeah? This is where these low carb diets and so forth are based on. We know we can use fat energy instead of carb energy if we need to. Yeah? Fructose, our body cannot use. Fructose, the only bit of our body that can deal with it is the liver. Our body cannot use fructose for energy. So what does it do with it? It treats it like an ASBO additive. What did I say about ASBO additives? I said many ASBO additives are fat soluble. What does our body do with extreme antisocial additives? Sticks them in a white padded cell, right? To protect our body, our society, protects our society, our body, by sticking them in a white padded cell, removing them from being a threat. What happens to this guy, the fructose? That the only organ that can deal with it in the body is the liver, and the rest of our body cannot use it for energy. Where does it go? Gets treated like an ASBO additives, goes in a fat cell. With the added bonus that being so overworked with checkouts going at manic at the same time, when we metabolise fructose, this starts kicking off something called uric acid. And I haven't got the book handy, but Dr. Robert Lustig's Fat Chance book called Fat Chance, which deals largely with sugar and really goes into the biochemistry of fructose. It kicks off uric acid, which uric acid, if you've got high uric acid in your system, which is a byproduct of our liver metabolising fructose. High uric acid is something that causes gout. It's also something that causes hypertension. Where's hypertension? High blood pressure. So he did an investigation. There was a lot of university students, I believe, if memory serving, that had high blood pressure, and it got traced back to high fructose in their diets, because F for fructose, F for fat, goes into the fat pathway in our liver, onto the fat checkout, kicks off uric acid as a byproduct as it's being metabolised, which leads to high blood pressure. Lots of biochemistry in that process. We don't really need to know that, and it's a bit sort of but in essence, that's how it is. So when we eat fructose, And this is why I've had this massive lead up talking about fibre, not wanting to scare you off fruit, because obviously we know fruit contains fructose. That's how I used to remember fructose was like the fruit sugar, because obviously it's fruity fructose. But now we can call it fatty fructose, because basically fructose, and when we think of these high fructose corn syrups and high fructose syrups and agave nectar, which is pretty much fructose. Careful I say that, sounds awfully rude. F for fructose, F for fat. So what happens here is this metabolizing of fructose. Our body can't use it for energy, so our liver deals with it like an ASBO additive, sticks it in a white padded cell, our fat, with the added bonus of kicking off uric acid as a byproduct, which gives us high blood pressure. But please don't be scared, as I have already said. I still eat sugar. I'm human. I like my food and I like my flavour, and I have been brought up in a day and age where we have these beautiful man-made products that taste ever so scrummy, and I like eating them too. And I've already been on the mince pies, even though it's in November, don't care. So how do I do that yet maintain my weight, not put it all back on? How did I lose it whilst still consuming sugar? Because although initially what started out as a calorie counting exercise fast became something else, and I realised I didn't need to count calories at all. What do all diets, and I mean every single diet out there, what do they all have in common? Every single diet has in common. Every weight loss program tends to focus on these two elements of losing weight. And both are hard. One, focus on reducing energy, usually by reducing